Hello, you're Matthew's mother, right? The woman on the other end of the phone sounded very rushed. I racked my brain right there, but couldn't think of any connection. It's time to close. Matthew is waiting, so please hurry and come pick him up, she continued. Excuse me, but who are you? So I asked. Turns out, the caller was a preschool teacher I didn't know, and after asking for details, a shocking truth was revealed. My name is Jennifer, a 28-year-old office worker. Thankfully, I enjoy my job and lead a fulfilling life. Since I was never really good at socializing, I focused solely on working hard as my main virtue when I first started my job. Many people at work took notice of me, and I felt blessed. Thanks to them, I've been able to keep working up to this point. My boss, Joseph, who has been looking out for me since I started, is 50 years old. At first, I felt tense due to the age difference, but he has always taken care of me, teaching me not just about work, but also important manners as a working adult. He also wanted to hear the thoughts of the younger generation, often asking for advice humbly from his colleagues. I hadn't thought of that. Thank you. It's really helpful. He would always make sure to express his gratitude verbally. It might seem like a small thing, but it was motivating for me. In these times of change, there's much to learn from the younger generation. This was his mantra, and he never stopped thinking about what's best for the company and his coworkers. He was the ideal boss for me, and I respected him deeply. So, I tried to learn as much as I could from him and applied it in how I interacted with my subordinates. While handling daily tasks, I also made sure to maintain proper manners when dealing with people. Not just instructing, but also bringing out the best in them and praising their efforts. It's not easy, but it's crucial when working as a team. Thanks to my diligence, I gained the trust of my colleagues and smoothly advanced my career. One day, we're about to start a major project soon. Would you like to join? My boss said. Seeing it as a rare opportunity, I immediately agreed. Though I was nervous, I was thrilled that everyone in the department promised their full cooperation. When stuck, the goal wasn't to solve everything alone to gain recognition, but to seek opinions for better outcomes and create something together. This mindset has made working much easier for me. Now, as things have gotten busier, I spend more of my weekends refreshing myself. My hobby is watching animals. I visit various pet shops, find solace in the animals, and enjoy imagining having my own pets. I've lived in my current apartment since I started working. It's a bit small. It's a no-pet building, so I'm planning to move to a pet-friendly place for a luxurious life with my beloved pets. On weekends, I spend time planning my next living situation, which has become a source of joy. Being curious by nature, I enjoy researching various animals, their traits, and how they fit in a home, considering all possibilities. I also seek advice from pet owners to learn more. As for romance, as I've gotten older, I hear more about people getting married and feel the pressure to explore dating scenes. Initially, I participated thinking of it as a social learning experience, but gradually, I grew tired of it. Having little interest in romance, I've recently been politely declining, preferring to spend my limited time on my hobbies. One day off. As usual, after being comforted by pets at the pet shop and on my way home, I received a call from an unknown number. I usually don't answer, but considering the ongoing major project involving many people, I thought it might be a business call. Hello? As I spoke, the woman on the other end, in a rushed voice. Hello? You're Matthew's mother, aren't you? It's well past pickup time, but you haven't come yet? Said. Of course. I had no clue and was completely baffled. To clarify the situation, ready to be scolded, I asked, Excuse me, but who are you? After the woman mentioned an unfamiliar preschool's name, she said, puzzled, I'm sorry, it was a mistake, and hung up. Stunned, I was about to collect my thoughts when the phone rang again. Answering the phone again. I'm really sorry to bother you again, but after checking with Matthew's father, it seems this is indeed the correct number, so please hurry and come pick him up. The woman from before said in a stern tone. I immediately responded. I'm sorry, but I'm not married, nor do I have any children. To which she replied, What do you mean? Sounding confused. Thinking we would just confuse each other more over the phone, I suggested, I'd like to clarify the situation, so I'll come visit once, and got permission to head to the preschool. Upon arrival and entering, one child saw me and joyfully ran towards me. Mom! Shouting. However, the moment he saw my face up close and realized I wasn't his mother, he went back to the teacher. Not Mom. When will she come? Seeing the child seek comfort from the teacher, my heart felt a bit heavy. I was taken to a separate room to hear the full story from the teacher. Apparently, my name and contact information had been submitted to the preschool without my consent. Matthew is from a single-parent family, and the protocol was to contact the father first, then the grandfather, and me, supposedly his common-law wife, third. According to Matthew's father, they're not married yet, but planning to live together soon. The teacher looked sternly at the list of emergency contacts for Matthew. After pleading my case about my contact being used without my permission, she gave me only the names of Matthew's father and grandfather. Are you kidding me? Turns out, Matthew was my boss's grandson. The boss's surname is quite unique in this area. There's no one else with the same full name, so if it matches, it's likely him. It made sense that my boss could use my contact information without my consent. However, if it truly was my boss who used my name, I couldn't fathom why. I had never heard any mention of this from him before, and all I knew was that his son was a single father doing his best to raise his child. The mystery deepened, and I left the preschool after saying goodbye to the teacher. The next day, after arriving at work, I confronted my boss immediately. To my surprise, he admitted to using my contact information without hesitation and didn't seem to think it was wrong at all. Well, I've been taking care of you at work, so cut me some slack. My son has it tough being a single parent. Plus, he likes you. You haven't had a boyfriend in a while, right? It's tough if you don't have kids when you're young. I'll have you marry my son. He said this with a smile, as if it was nothing out of the ordinary. I was so shocked that I lost my words. You're a great subordinate, so I'm sure you'll do well as my son's wife too. My boss continued with this unbelievable statement. I felt betrayed by the boss I trusted and also felt a sense of revulsion. Was all his concern for me up to this point because of this? While I was in confusion, a meeting with his son was arranged without my consent. It's true. When you're really surprised, you find yourself speechless, and I felt desperate, fearing my life was getting out of control. Then, during lunch break, I decided it was time to consult someone, and prepared meticulously for the day I would meet my boss's son. The day came, and in a private room of a fancy restaurant, my cheerful boss and his son were sitting, talking. "Jennifer, thank you for coming today to discuss the arrangement with my son, Charles. I'd be happy if we could have a thorough discussion." My boss, oblivious to how I felt, went on. His son, without even greeting me, looked me over from head to toe as if evaluating me. The moment my boss mentioned the wedding, I denied it. "I'm sorry, but I never agreed to marry your son. Can we not rush this discussion?" Standing up to them was nerve-wracking, but unlike before, I wasn't alone, which gave me strength to speak clearly. My boss glared at me, but I continued. "You did use my contact information as an emergency contact for the preschool, right? And even wrote that I was his common-law wife. That's a serious crime." He responded, "My son is at the prime of his work life, so he can't go pick him up. Since you're going to marry my son, it's normal to give the wife-to-be's number, isn't it? What do you mean by suing?" And his son added, "I'm the son of your elite boss who's been taking care of your work. You should feel lucky to be able to marry me." As the situation escalated beyond control, I was about to call for help when two women entered the private room. "Joseph, Charles, both of you need to stop this at once." Startled at their names being called, the two men froze at the sight of a woman. The first to scold my boss was his son's ex-wife, Margaret. "Listening to you talk, you've been incredibly rude to Jennifer." Then the other woman said, "I am representing both of you as your lawyer," and showed her business card to my boss and his son. Shocked, my boss and his son suddenly shrank back, as if their previous bravado was a lie. Actually, the person I had consulted was Dorothy, a lawyer and a friend. We sometimes hang out privately, but I never imagined needing her professional help. Dorothy mentioned, "When I saw the phone number, I couldn't believe it, but you were indeed caught in a serious situation." And despite being busy, she took my concerns to heart. I told her about the unknown call from the preschool, claiming me as a de facto wife, and showed her the photos. Dorothy then revealed, "Actually, Charles's ex-wife had consulted me about their child. It's best if she joins us too, considering the invasion of your privacy with your phone number," and quickly introduced me to the ex-wife. Meeting the ex-wife for the first time, I was nervous about what kind of person she would be. When Dorothy told me about it, I felt relieved that there might be a solution. "Thank you so much." But she expressed her gratitude politely. Despite thinking it was unnecessary, I also expressed, "No, thank you for coming. I'm very grateful," feeling glad I took action. Years ago, when I divorced Charles, I was working part-time. Since Charles worked for a big company, I gave him custody for Matthew's future. I never imagined it would lead to this. I'm so sorry. The ex-wife apologized, although it wasn't her fault. I assured her there was no need to apologize and encouraged her to stop. Then she shared more details. After the divorce, she moved nearby to be close to Matthew, hearing rumors that Charles wasn't actually taking care of their son. Concerned, she spoke with Charles, who admitted to neglecting Matthew, but refused to discuss custody changes to avoid paying child support, as she consulted with Dorothy. While married, the ex-wife often interacted with Matthew, but Charles seemed indifferent, not out of lack of interest, but negligence. Researching my boss's son revealed various issues. A preschool teacher showed me Matthew's notebook, indicating pickup times, revealing that post-divorce, Charles initially left work early for pickups, but recently started arriving just in time. Teachers testified to repeated last-minute work excuses for his absence. Moreover, Charles began using the preschool on supposed off days, raising concerns about family time. Despite suggestions to spend weekends with Matthew, Charles excused his absence with sudden work, always informing the preschool at the last moment. He was always troubled by last-minute notifications that work had come up. However, it turns out that his boss's son had been lying about having work, instead dropping Matthew off at preschool or with the boss's couple to go out and play. He also dressed Matthew in the same clothes almost every day, never buying him anything new, leading Matthew to become indifferent. It also came to light that he had been using the alimony his ex-wife had been sending for his own leisure. Hearing this, I couldn't help but feel disgusted with the boss's son. The ex-wife was tearful. If only I had noticed sooner and taken action, saying. Dorothy presented the evidence to the boss and his son, and finally, Dorothy, to the preschool without permission, she stated clearly. The faces of the boss and his son turned pale. The boss. Jennifer? Margaret? Please. I'll pay this time. Just spare me the lawsuit, pleaded. I'll make Charles apologize too. Please forgive us. And apologized. I felt that forgiving them now would only result in the boss paying off the situation, and it seemed unlikely that his son would change his heart. Looking anxious, I turned to the ex-wife, who seemed to share my feelings, saying, Do you think getting your parents to pay off your mistake will make everything okay? I will never forgive you. The boss's son also pleaded with me. Don't just stand there. Persuade them. But of course, I had no intention of forgiving him and reiterated my intention to sue. Thanks to Dorothy's cooperation and the evidence, the custody of the child was safely transferred to the ex-wife. Furthermore, I relentlessly sued the boss and received compensation for emotional distress. The boss and his son cursed me and the ex-wife as money grubbers until the end, accusing us of forgetting past favors. However, the incident became known in the company, resulting in the boss's son being demoted and the boss being transferred to a window-side department. The boss's son had been using his father's position to his advantage, ordering employees around as he pleased. But since many employees had been taken care of by the boss since they were new, no one dared to confront the boss's son. As a result, no one stood up for him in this incident, and he became despised and avoided by everyone, eventually resigning due to loneliness. In the end, while being coldly looked upon by everyone, the boss's son said, "I have been thinking of quitting this low-level company anyway." But his arrogant attitude persisted in interviews, making it hard for him to find a job. And he is now living off part-time jobs. He continues to boast about his previous job wherever he goes, still being disliked by everyone. When the boss's wife found out about the incident, she demanded a divorce. The boss's wife, not knowing me, "I can't believe you would cause so much trouble for others," exclaimed in fury. Furthermore, since the house was in the ex-wife's name, he was promptly kicked out, demoted to a window-side department, and with a significantly reduced salary. The boss struggles to make ends meet while working multiple jobs to pay me compensation. I have become good friends with Margaret, the boss's son's ex-wife, since that day. It was an unexpected turn of events, but we found we had similar thoughts and values, and before we knew it, we had become friends. Matthew is also living happily with Margaret, enjoying each day. Since Matthew was more attached to Margaret than to the boss's son, I am relieved. Without the boss's help, I was able to successfully complete a project with the team, leading to my promotion in even busier days. Working hard and earning more, I moved to a pet-friendly apartment and finally got the pet I had always wanted. Having a comforting presence every day has made work more productive and life more fulfilling. Now, my joy is spending weekends at the park with Margaret, Matthew, and my pet, cherishing these happy days. Mother-in-law Sandra told me to go to the changing room. Sandra always turns off the water heater only when I'm bathing as a form of harassment. I couldn't believe Sandra had prepared a warm bath. There must be something up. With a mean smirk, Sandra looked down on me, suspicious. I am Angela, 28 years old, living with my husband Christopher of the same age, both of us working. We met through a mutual friend at work, and this year marks our 3rd year of marriage. As our careers started to take off, we supported and motivated each other through thick and thin. Being in slightly different departments meant we didn't run into each other much at work, maintaining a relationship that felt like an extension of being good colleagues without mixing business with pleasure. While having children might change our perspective, fortunately, our parents-in-law didn't seem too keen on having grandchildren, sparing us from any nagging on that front. However, the biannual pilgrimage to my husband's family home is, without exaggeration, my sole source of dread. His family's house is so far away, it requires a plane ride from where we live. This means we have to book flights and pack days in advance. As the date looms closer, I find myself repeatedly checking the calendar, dreading its arrival. The main reason for my dread is the subtle bullying I endure from Sandra. It's the kind of pettiness that's not worth mentioning to others. Like the time during a family meal when Sandra forgot to set a spoon for me, leaving me to eat with a plastic one. Or when she accidentally tripped over my phone charger, leaving me with an uncharged phone the next day. Complaints about these minor, yet endless incidents didn't seem worth the energy. I confronted these issues in my first year. I'm troubled when things like this happen, to which Sandra would sneer maliciously. Are you really making a fuss over an incident? You're quite the scary daughter-in-law. Her delight in my frustration only made things worse. Engaging with her childish behavior and attitude was exhausting. So, I decided to maintain my composure regardless of her actions, but this hardly allowed for any rest, leading to sleepless nights and increased irritability during our stays. While Sandra was problematic, my father-in-law, Paul, and my husband's sister, Melissa, were always welcoming. That made it even harder for me to bring up Sandra's behavior to my husband. Once again, as the end of the year approached, we found ourselves lugging our heavy bags, gasping for breath as we took flights, buses, and taxis to my husband's family home. The well-maintained garden at my husband's family home, a hobby of Paul's, symbolized his good health and retirement from his long-time job at a bank. Unlike Sandra, who was raised in a wealthy family and has a brash, self-indulgent character, Paul is solid and a bit shy. Welcome, Christopher and Angela. Melissa, the younger sister-in-law still in college, is energetic and her smile is charming. Every holiday, her changing hair color initially made me think she was a stranger. Despite her flashy appearance and sharp features similar to Sandra's, she's turned out to be a loving sister with a fondness for children. I've seen her getting along well with Christopher, occasionally playing games together. Even in the dead of winter, Melissa, wearing shorts, guided us. Once in the large living room, Sandra approached us with heavy footsteps, carrying cold coffee. Sandra has always seemed to me as an adversary from the first meeting. It would have been more straightforward if she had spilled the coffee on me by pretending to trip, but with my husband and others watching, Sandra wouldn't dare. However, it's inevitable that after finishing the coffee, Angela, please start with washing the dishes. Sandra starts ordering me around. Since we both work, we've shared household chores since before we were married. When I first mentioned this to Sandra, I can't believe it. Making Christopher do chores when he's so tired, she screamed in horror. And then, I'll straighten out Angela's attitude. So whenever we visited my husband's family home, Sandra made sure I was burdened with almost all the chores. Initially, Christopher would say, "Stop it, Sandra. Angela's tired too." But each time, Sandra complained. It's okay for me if it satisfies Sandra, so I persuaded Christopher. However, this became a source of stress. Sandra dumped all sorts of menial tasks on me. In summer, it was weeding the garden, watering flowers, and cleaning the drains. In winter, it involved washing dishes, laundry, and cleaning the bathrooms. Always the toughest jobs for the season. Moreover, if she caught me using hot water, she'd fly into a rage, and then I'd find the water heater turned off. I've thought about discussing this with Christopher, but Sandra's bullying only occurs when he's busy helping Paul with chores, like organizing the garage or washing the car, making it hard to bring up. Sandra's main activity seems to be cooking when relatives gather. She dirties the kitchen I cleaned without hesitation and then tells me to clean up everything from preparation to washing up. Sure, Sandra's cooking might be delicious. People, perhaps out of politeness, unanimously praise it. Sandra, brimming with confidence, would say, "Right? It's all thanks to Angela's help." Even though she doesn't mean it, trying to make herself look better. Behind the scenes, her constant refrain is, "Can't you do anything right? Such a useless daughter-in-law." Yet she dares to say such things. If she weren't careful about her audience, she might as well have been poisoning me. Paul and Melissa probably think Sandra and I get along fine since they only see the surface. I thought as long as I endured Sandra's harassment, there wouldn't be any trouble. But this recent winter, when she made sure I couldn't get hot water during my bath, I nearly lost my temper. I hadn't done anything to deserve such treatment from Sandra. Thinking about the hours spent traveling with heavy luggage just to face harassment here feels utterly ridiculous. Perhaps Sandra sees me as a fun toy. Unfortunately, I'm not idle enough to enjoy the mischief of a mean old lady. I wondered if there was any way to curb this irritation when an unexpected opportunity came on the second day of our visit. As usual, I was alone in the cold kitchen, finishing up the chores asked of me. Then Sandra peeked over my shoulder. "Angela, the bathroom is free now. Go ahead and take a warm bath while it's still available. Everyone else is done," and said. Looking at the clock, it was already 9 p.m. From the living room, I could hear Paul and Melissa chatting. "Thank you. I'll go in after finishing this." I replied politely, though Sandra's intentions were transparent. I wish she could vary her harassment tactics, because it's honestly not surprising anymore. After finishing the chores, I returned to the room where my husband and I were staying, finding him lounging in the same clothes as this morning. "Oh, haven't you taken a bath yet?" "Yeah, I fell asleep earlier. Long trips really tire me out." "Really? I just finished my tasks. Could you go ahead and bathe first? I need to change and rest a bit too." Christopher agreed without hesitation. "Wonder if the water's gone cold." "So, Sandra mentioned it's still warm." I told him. I felt a bit guilty knowing what might happen to Christopher, but using her beloved son seemed like an effective lesson for Sandra. After Christopher left, I decided to check my emails leisurely. Soon, I was startled by Christopher shouting from the bathroom. His anger was unlike anything I'd heard, even in our arguments, making me rush towards the noise. Paul and Melissa were already there, surrounding Sandra with Christopher. "Why would you do something so dangerous? Slipping and getting hurt would be serious," Christopher continued to yell, unfazed by Sandra's downturned head. The bathroom was pitch dark. As expected, Sandra had played the same prank she always does on me, but this time on Christopher. Christopher was furious because he has a mild fear of the dark. stemming from being accidentally locked in a dark place during a childhood game of hide and seek, making him uneasy in the dark since. When he entered the bathtub, he found it empty, drained of water. Thinking someone had mistakenly removed the plug, he tried to refill it, but no hot water came from the tap. And then, the lights were suddenly turned off, causing him to panic and shout. Surprised, Sandra inadvertently opened the bathroom door, encountering Christopher. "Mom, you know I've always been scared of the dark, right? I went in because I heard the water was still warm, but it was freezing." "It's not what you think. I thought Angela was in there." Christopher didn't miss Sandra slipping up. "Why are you always doing this to Angela?" Sandra turned pale and desperately tried to cover it up. "It's not like that. Well, not exactly. I thought everyone had finished bathing and nobody was around. Why isn't there any hot water? Could the water heater be broken?" Sandra squeezed past everyone towards the water heater. "It's old after all. Quite the trouble, isn't it?" she said, trying to tap it. While everyone watched in silence, Sandra, realizing how pitiful it was to do such a thing, next entered the bathroom and turned on the shower tap. Suddenly, hot water vigorously started gushing out, steaming. "See? It seems to be working now. Truly whimsical. Quite the nuisance." Sandra tried to muster a forced smile, but Christopher was relentless. "Is it common for it to break and fix itself so conveniently? If that's really the case, it would be rude not to have it repaired before relatives gather." Sandra was at a loss for words. Her expression betrayed a stubborn refusal to give up on the situation. "Just wait a minute." Paul, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. He seemed to have gone somewhere and then reappeared with a piece of paper in hand. "We just replaced the water heater last month. It's still under warranty, so we can call if there's really a problem. I hope you haven't been using the water heater as an excuse to make Angela feel bad all this time," Paul said in a low voice, making Sandra stiffen up. Christopher took the water heater contract from Paul and scrutinized it. Melissa also peeked over, looking at Sandra with a pitying glaze. "I've never heard Mom say anything was wrong with the water heater before. If anything, I use the most hot water since I have the longest hair." "Me too. I love hot baths, so I'm in the bathtub all year round," Melissa and Paul said, nodding in agreement. It turned out that when the water heater was replaced, the brand changed, and, indeed, there were only bills from last month for the current model. This piece of paper became the definitive evidence exposing Sandra's lie. Thanks to Paul, who had been a meticulous banker and household manager for years, everything came to light, and Sandra's excuses didn't hold up. Such an obvious lie was unlikely to be believed by anyone. Christopher, still half naked, turned to me, apologizing. "Angela, I'm sorry for making you bear this alone." Following him, Paul and Melissa also apologized, which surprised me. Sandra, too, begrudgingly apologized while glaring at me with sharp eyes, clearly unrepentant. Afterward, Sandra was almost dragged back to the back room by Paul. Perhaps she was going to be scolded by him. Having only seen his gentle side, even I felt a chill. The next day, I was called over by Christopher and his family again. We sat around a grand table in the living room. Paul was the first to speak. "I've heard all about the harassment my wife has been causing Angela up until now. I want to apologize again. It was truly unforgivable." Following his apology, Sandra apologized on the spot as well. Her demeanor was completely different from yesterday, sobbing and soaking her handkerchief. It seems she was severely scolded by Paul. The reason for the harassment was something absurd. She couldn't stand the idea of Christopher doing household chores. At Paul's words, I thought to myself, of course. Sandra had been saying that to me from the start, and to think she could harass someone for years over just that reason shows quite the persistence. However, Christopher was still furious. "We decided together about this when we got married, didn't we? Angela works just as much as I do, and it's outdated to think that housework is just for women." Christopher tends to go on when he starts talking, so Melissa managed to calm him down. "Using Angela to make your own life easier, even if it's just twice a year for Thanksgiving and New Year's, isn't right. Then why didn't you say anything to me?" Melissa added, causing Sandra, who had been shrinking, to shrink even more. Then Christopher continued, "That's why I'll be coming here alone from now on, and I won't stay over anymore. We'll welcome Mom and Dad to our house, but Angela won't be coming here." I hadn't realized the conversation had progressed this far without my knowledge. Sandra couldn't meet my gaze and just looked down. We had already booked a flight that evening, so Christopher and I went back to our room to pack. Even thinking we wouldn't come here anymore didn't feel real yet. Maybe I should have consulted Christopher before things escalated this much, but there's no point dwelling on the past. I've decided to endure the harassment on my own for these 3 years, so I think it's okay to give myself some credit for my perseverance. I hugged Paul and Melissa a bit longer than usual, embedding my farewell in gratitude towards my husband's family. Afterwards, Thanksgiving and New Year's became an opportunity for us to spend time as a couple, and we started enjoying traveling together. It seems Christopher wasn't very fond of going home in the first place, reluctantly returning every year due to Sandra's numerous calls. Sandra might have resented me for stealing her beloved eldest son, but I'm glad Christopher himself didn't adopt such thinking and maintained his principles. It's embarrassing to say, but this was an event that made me fall in love with my husband all over again. Years later, we were blessed with a child in our 30s, and Paul and Melissa rushed to be with us for the birth. I was bracing myself for Sandra to come as well, but Paul stubbornly refused to let her, saying, "With her, who knows what she would say to Angela, who's just given birth and is vulnerable." Paul probably wanted to be there together, but he prioritized my feelings. Melissa seemed to be holding a baby for the first time, completely devoted to the child. She's studying childcare in college, so I'm looking forward to entrusting our child to her in the future. While Christopher and Paul were away, Melissa whispered to me that since we stopped visiting, relatives invited by Sandra started noticing my absence and suspected harassment. Despite Sandra's desperate resistance, the rumor spread among the relatives. Sandra ended up feeling isolated, not only within the family, but also among the relatives. Having been arrogant towards the relatives too, She faced backlash, and nobody wanted to visit her husband's family anymore, Melissa told me. Well, it's good that those annoying gatherings are gone, she said with a smile, making me laugh too. Melissa mentioned she liked the area every time she visited us and started thinking about looking for a job here. Hearing that, Christopher seemed visibly pleased.